Today we're going to be reacting to St Pancras Station in London. So I think St Pancras is a really interesting building, isn't it? It's kind of lots of different layers. So you've got that facade with the kind of really famous Gothic red brick thing by George Gilbert Scott. You've got kind of the bit behind, which a lot of it was part of the previous station. And then you've got the new St Pancras International, that kind of really contemporary new train station that's linked into and joined on, that's the Channel Tunnel hub, you know, with the famous kind of huge long champagne bar and things. So it's a really interesting mix. I think it's a really successful mix of the hotel, the station, the kind of international station as well. I'm not a massive fan of Gothic, I've got to be honest, but I think you'd be on really shaky ground to say that you weren't impressed by it, that you thought it wasn't impressive. I mean, it's a phenomenal piece of work. It's colossal. Just the weight of it, the size of it, the scale of it, it's just unbelievable. So yeah, I think it's really dramatic. Yeah, as someone that doesn't really like Gothic, I think it's really impressive. If you see St Pancras in its streetscape, I mean, it's such a huge thing, right in the centre. It's now surrounded by, you know, the new King's Cross Basin, all these kind of new buildings around it, many by kind of really famous architects. You've got, you know, Google's new headquarters and all those things going in around it. And it probably makes more sense now as this huge, grand gesture in a way that we don't really do anymore. You know, massive bell towers and kind of, you know, it looks like something out of kind of Gotham. You know, you kind of expect bats flying around the top of it. But it's just such a huge gesture for ultimately a hotel and train station. It's so ornate, it's so beautifully decorated. I mean, the work involved in doing Gothic well. So it's, you know, yes, I think if you think of it, you think of it as a red brick. But there's a lot of detailing in yellow brick around, you know, window arches and things. So there's actually a lot of colour and texture in it. There's stone in the columns. It's a lot more kind of interesting, but I think because it's so big and so vast, your initial thought it's a huge red brick building. The roof work around all these little kind of pop-up dormers and hips and spires and things, you know, it's like a cathedral roof, but it's on a hotel. It's amazing. Yeah, I suppose I have to be careful saying blanket statement that I don't like Gothic. Someone will come and criticise me for that one. So Gothic it's a really ornate style. It's got lots of spires and turrets and points and things like that. Typically there's lots of arches involved, and a Gothic arch is normally a pointed arch. So other eras had rounded arches, rounded tops, whereas Gothic would always have points. It's that really kind of harks back to medieval, but it's not. It's really crisp actually, Gothic, but it's very heavily ornamented. And I think you then see, and again, it's cyclical, isn't it? So you see these waves of a building that sits broadly within a trend, or an era, or a kind of movement, Gothic. But within Gothic, there's a huge range of different projects. In the same way that you look at, you know, Georgian era, like in Edinburgh where we are just now, and you would say the new town of Edinburgh is Georgian, but actually when you go round it, in the same way that the Georgian area is in London, there's huge variety between the buildings. So it's a movement, it's an era rather than a specific, everything looks the same pattern book. I mean, I don't think you could build something like this now. I just don't think we have the skill, the number of people who could do the kind of trades involved in this kind of thing. But it was built in a different time. It was built in an era when, you know, this was done by master craftsmen who had their own squads that worked on it, who, you know, huge numbers of people working manually in construction, probably not anywhere near as safely as we would expect or want now. If you think back to those, you know, those classic pictures of them putting up skyscrapers in New York where the guys are walking along the steel beams with no protection, and you think now that's, you know, you couldn't even imagine that kind of behaviour. But actually this is even, you know, probably an even more dangerous period of time when there's huge amounts of people, there's huge amounts of manual labour, there's a lot of cutting. It was the era when you just threw bodies at it, and it's lots and lots and lots of bricks. I mean, when it comes down to it, it's millions and millions of bricks. I don't know if anyone's ever counted them. Terrifying idea if they have, but just that volume of material, the weight and the labour involved in doing it. But yet, when you zoom out and look back at it from a distance, there are these really delicate spires and these really light points as well. So George Gilbert Scott, one of the kind of most prominent of the Gothic revivalists operating in England at the time, just has a massive portfolio. I mean, like, just a huge volume of major buildings, public buildings, obviously being a Gothic revivalist, a lot of church buildings, even I think the St Mary's Cathedral here in Edinburgh. So they're all different, but they ultimately have that element of spires, pointed arches, very heavily decorated. So in that sense, I would say, yeah, it's pretty typical.